Hi, I'm Peter Cowan, the Bee Whisperer. We are going to do some of this year's first extracting. And first of all, we'll start with looking at the honey over here. We've got some capped honey, if you want to take some honey out, Jordan. And we're going to test it. Oh, and the odd bee in there still. That's the hive tool. Let's get a frame of capped honey out. And the capped honey should be no problem. Honey should be about 18% moisture. And so the bees will cap honey when it is fully cured. I'm not sure if it's 17.6 or 18.4, I can't remember exactly. But basically, once it's down to about the mid-18s, this honey will never spoil. So the honey will, it might crystallize, that sort of thing, but it will never ferment. So what we're going to do is, with this refractometer, let's put a smear in there. And this closes it up, and what it does is, depending on how much sugar is in a solution, it will bend the light a certain amount. And so if I look through this the right way up, this is very concentrated. This is about 14.6, so it's very low water content. If anything, it's a little bit what we call dry. So we'll take this off, clean it up, and we'll look at a frame that's uncapped, Jordan. So basically, what bees are doing when they bring nectar into the hive, which is, the nectar might be 50–60% water. They're fanning it to evaporate as much water as possible. They're bringing that water content down, 50, 40, 30, 20. Once we're at the region of about 18 parts per 18%, the honey is now cured. Whether they've capped it or not is irrelevant. So if we look at this frame, where you would, a lot of folks would be concerned about harvesting a frame like this. This is cured. This is not necessarily cured, but it might be cured. We don't know. So what we'll do is we'll check. Now, one field test that you can do is if you shake this and droplets, so shake it over here, Jordan, nothing will probably come out. If you can shake it in the field like that, it's usually cured. It's usually at about the right percentage of water content. What we're going to do here is we're going to take some of this and just be doubly sure. Do it the right way up again. This will focus it. And this is about 18.5, 18.8%. So it's just a bit wet, but we're going to be mixing it with some very dry honey. So we're mixing this with some, what I said, 15–16%. Let's turn it around. What's the other side of that like? Okay, this side is not capped at all. So we'll check this. This is about 18.7% as well. So it's okay. This is a little bit wet. If I had a super of all honey like this, there'd be a danger of it fermenting because it's in the high 18%, almost 19%. As I say, it's nearer the 18%, 18.0%, give or take a small amount. That is what we're looking for. So if I had a super that was only like this, there'd be a danger of it fermenting. But as we're mixing this with stuff with 3% less sugar water content in there, it's going to be sufficiently mixed that it's not going to ferment. So right now those two samples would be good. You want to grab one more frame? Let's take a different box. Well, no, let's not worry about that. Let's just take, yeah, let's move it. We'll get a different box. Just move that stuff off here. I'll move this frame and put this box across. About 70 pounds of honey in there, darn close. Let's take a sample from there. I'll clean this up. Thank you. And this is at about 18%. So we are good to go. If there was a danger, if we found that the sample said we have a much higher water content than we want, 19%, 20%, we can still use that honey, but we can take some precautions. This room is set at in the mid 80s of degrees. So we are at about, it was about 86 degrees here. 80 degrees or so, we've got a good temperature for making the honey so it runs nicely in the extractor, but also we've got the temperature high so that if I run a fan in here blowing over these supers, that's why these supers are stacked crisscross so air can flow through them. You can have a fan blowing on them and that will take the moisture out of the honey and it could bring that water content down. So if you find that you've got honey that you've taken off the hive that might be in danger of being too low water content because you've got more uncapped than you thought, put it in a warm room, blow a fan on it, and after a couple of days you've probably brought that water content down. Now, if it's really humid weather, you could actually raise the water content. So ideally you want to wait till it's nice dry weather to do that. Blowing a fan over it will reduce then the water content. So let's get on and do some extracting. We'll take some frames over here. This is heating up. It's actually heated up way more than we need to. It's getting hot. We'll take a frame. We'll demonstrate some uncapping. So if you come over this side, because I'm right-handed, so I tend to work this way. So this is called a capping plane. It heats up the element here, and we're just going to run it along these frames and take those cappings off. And it'll fall into this draining board here. And that honey will drain through, and we'll collect the honey from the box below. But all these frames here, frames full of honey, they are going to be ready to extract. Okay. So it doesn't really matter how deep you dig into there. Obviously you don't want to destroy the combs, take off any more of the comb than you have to. But now all the cells are uncapped, so the honey can come freely out of the comb. So now it's going into the extractor. If you look down in here, Cam, this will hold 10 deep frames like this. And we'll do some more. Thank you. Now, there are other devices for uncapping the honey. This is for doing a large quantity relatively quickly. Other good apparatus, things that you can use for uncapping, which we'll demonstrate a little later, is things like a capping scratcher. You can use a plain old kitchen knife. If you do use a kitchen knife, I'd be inclined to use a serrated one, because the sawing action can be quite helpful. But also there's some knives made specially for uncapping honey, which you can keep in a pot of hot water and just use it, cut down, put it in a pot of hot water while you get the next frame ready. So some frames are easy. We've taken most of the brood off here. There was a bit of brood there, still a tiny bit, but that's just it's not gonna go anywhere. We just uncap around it. this in here. If you have a look down here, Ken, I'll show you the drainage that will go on in here. If you look down in here, here's the cappings that are still full of honey. They're going through the perforated plate, so it's dripping down. If you look from the side here, it'll drip into this area here, and when there's sufficient amount here, we'll open this valve up and the honey will start dripping through. Then goes into a sieve to catch the little bits of wax and things, the odd bee, and then we've got clean honey ready to go. On a smaller scale, you would just do that straight, you can do that straight onto your bucket, onto your sort of bottling bucket. So you could just put your sieve at the top of the bottling bucket up here. Just take it down. You could take a sieve, and it might be ones I'm selling this year are these cone shaped ones. So you've got your extracting bucket, you can put the honey straight into here, whether it's straight from the extractor or your cappings, it can drain through this, and then you can bottle it straight from this tank here with the gate valve. But on a larger scale, we've got to do it in several stages. Thank you. You can see this summer honey was very light in colour, beautiful light coloured honey. On this piece of wood here, it's not very good for this plastic frame, but I've got a little metal peg here, so the wooden frames I just stick onto that spike, but for these plastic ones I have to lean against that spike. Well, we've got a few frames going here. We want to also take the opportunity to balance the frames. So the frames that are most full of honey want to go opposite each other, and the frames that are least full of honey want to go opposite each other so that the weight distribution is balanced. Why don't you guys have a go? I'll take this off.
Okay. So satisfying watching that feel all right.
Okay, now before you turn it around, we want to trim those bits because, for example, down here and up here, that'll not come out unless we uncap it. So we can either use the plane like that, exactly, or we can use a smaller device to trim them up. Or it could be somebody else who moves it over there could do that. So that's not too bad. Let's turn it around. I should have some light on this side. Make for a better picture. In fact, I will get that sorted out. I'll hold this cap. Try not to dig deeper than you need to, but it doesn't really matter because we will recover it. But it's a shame to cut off more comb than we need to cut off.
I actually like that smell of burnt sugar. Not bad.
Yeah, just don't burn your thumb.
Do my best.
Get the bit in the far side there as well. Easy to miss those bits. And again, the other end of the comb. Yes, so don't worry about going through the whole thing. As well. See, we've got a space down here. If you do it too much too fast, it gets this cold and then it doesn't cut through as well. So then it starts to tear comb a little bit. But that's okay. The surprising thing is you can damage the combs quite a bit in the process of removing the honey, but the bees repair it beautifully. They seem to rebuild that cut or damaged comb extremely well.
So the capping is wax, right? So you
Yeah,
end up
this is
using that.
pure beeswax. So this is the sort of best beeswax for doing things like making cosmetics, lip balms, hand creams, that sort of thing. You get the cleanest wax from your cappings, particularly where you are taking it off combs that have never had brood in them. If you're taking it off combs that have had brood in them, some of the cappings are also repurposed brood comb, and that can be brown wax, so it's not quite as clean. What I'm doing with these frames is you'll see in that area, some of those notches are deep and some are, every other notch is deep and shallow, deep and shallow. So when you're doing deep frames, you can only fit 10 frames in that extractor. So you put them in the deep ones. Maybe a little too fast, I'm tearing it a little bit. Warm up some. Hot honey in my hand. Ouch. Take this burr combs off. Okay, now in theory, we're loaded up. 10 frames in there, hopefully reasonably balanced. We turn it on. And this governs the speed here. So it basically engages and disengages the fan belt. So right now the fan belt is slipping around a little bit. We've got two strong folks here who put a bit of weight on the base here, down here. That'll help make it more balanced. Now we're going to gradually speed it up a bit. So we're tightening this valve up. Now the fan belt's engaging a bit stronger. What's happening now is where my phone drops inside the extractor. Honey is being thrown out of the frames onto the sides of the extractor. Runs down the side of the extractor, and we'll be able to let it out there. We're ready. Hand up here, give you more mechanical advantage trying to hold it down. Tighten it up a bit more. Just going faster. Gets thrown out, usually the more balanced it becomes as the frames become lighter. There becomes such a big difference between weights and frames.
So you have it bolted down though. This thing would be
At the moment, yeah. Sometimes it works without even holding it down, but it usually helps to do so. Okay, let's see how we're doing. Frame out and see how we're looking. It's not much left in there. Not much at all. I would say we're good. We can take these frames out. Just put them in the super. Yep. Take them all out. Now where we see the stuff that's still capped, you go ahead. If the stuff that's still capped, that's where we see it's causing the imbalance. But these feel good and dry, and we did a pretty good job of uncapping them all. Bit of pollen in here still. That's okay. Gonna take out what we've got here. So if you hold this, as I say, what I've got to do in it before I open the valve here is tip this forward. I've got a little prop I put back here to make sure that the extractor stays out. There we go. And then we can let the honey out. And get right in close. This is the best bit.
Yeah, I want to do this too.
We've got the sieve in there to collect bits of wax as there's chunks of comb and things that were stuck to the frame. They're coming through. And again, this is where having the temperature high really helps, because if the temperature is too low, it takes forever to go through the sieve. These sieves are 600 microns. That's a little over half of a millimeter across. So that's quite a fine mesh. Will remove just about everything, but not remove things like pollen and all the goodness out of the honey. So this is not what you would call filtered honey. This is just called, we're just taking out the coarse bits in here. Filtered honey is very different. It's gone through a high pressure, very, very fine sieve to take pollen out. This is natural honey. This is not having anything removed apart from chunks of wax and the odd bee. Okay, I'll let you rinse your hands off before you cover my tripod with honey.
Not like I haven't already.
That's right. So we're ready to move on to the next frames. And so this extraction here, we've probably taken out 30 pounds, or about more like 40 pounds of honey. It would take a while. There's probably 10 pounds of honey still on the sides of the extractor, so it would just take a long while to drain out. But we're mixing all the honey together anyway. So we will close her up and get ready to do the next ones. Coming from the cappings. Frame's ready to go. Now, in case you're wondering why we sometimes put 9 frames in the honey super instead of 10, when you've got the comb sticking out fat like this, like this, like this, like this, it's a lot easier to cut the cappings off than when they're like this one. This is one that's harder to get the cappings off, but let's see how it looks. With these sort of planes, it's actually pretty easy. Just dig deeper and you can go sideways. But the issues are these bits that don't stick out very fast. You've got to go back over them and get those bits out. And so that's a little more complicated. So these ones that are not filled out fully, they are the harder ones to uncap. Takes a lot longer. In contrast, we'll look at one. This is with someone who's done a lot of uncapping. So for me, I can still take care of that pretty quickly. However, with a frame that's nice and fat, if we have a look at one that's nice and fat like this here, where the cappings stick out, pointed up here, the cappings stick out much faster than the frame, then it's pretty easy. If you had just a knife, you could just go one big cut. You can do it with the capping plane as well, but we'll just go straight across. Actually, it'd be easier with a knife on some of these than with the capping plane. It gets cooled down so much with all the honey in it. I'll have to do some with a knife to demonstrate it. So it's very easy to cut the cappings off when they stick out proud, like that. Okay. Just gonna go in, try and balance these out. That's rather full. It's not so full. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 deep supers, which were mostly full. 2 medium supers, which were less than half full, but about half full. So from them, we filled 1 full 5-gallon bucket. That's 60 pounds. This was last year's honey. There's about 40 something pounds in here. That one is going to make it to about 50 pounds. This one's going to be about 35-40 pounds. That one's going to be about 35 pounds. There's a little bit to drain out of there. There's quite a bit still to drain out of here. So it'll probably be another 25 pounds there. I think I totaled it up before, coming to about 230-240 pounds of honey for this first run. So let's label up the first honey. If not, I couldn't use the other one, but So the first honey of this year. And summer honey. S for summer, F for fall. Summer honey tends to crystallize slower than fall honey, so it's often good to distinguish between them. So there we have it, our first extraction of the year. About 240 pounds or so of honey. I expect this year it'll be somewhere between 2,000 and 4,000 pounds in total. Who knows, maybe more. So that's it for now. I'm Peter Cowan, the Bee Whisperer, and that's Jordan. We'll see you next time.